Single mom's unexpected gesture revealed incredible truth that transformed a CEO's life forever. Sarah walked into the coffee shop with a lightness that seemed to contrast the heavy weights of life she carried on her shoulders. With her daughter Lily's laughter ringing in her ears and homemade cookies in her hands, she beamed at the barista, grateful for a moment away from the chaos of their small apartment. But then she spotted him. The man buried behind a sea of papers, brow furrowed, hands clasped tightly around his coffee mug. There was something about him that struck her, a loneliness in his focus. Little did she know her simple gesture would ripple far beyond this moment. Jake sat in his high-rise corner office most days, swallowed by pressures, deadlines, and ambition running amok. The bright screens surrounding him hardly matched the darkness enveloping his thoughts. He often questioned the ethics behind his decisions, but fear paralyzed him. Betrayals within his firm had clouded his judgment, and the weight of corporate greed hung around his neck like a noose. Every day he faced a moral dilemma. Should he turn a blind eye to the practices plaguing his company, or expose them and risk losing everything? As Sarah approached, Jake didn't know whether to appreciate or dismiss her friendly disposition. She offered a cookie, explaining her daughter's love for baking. "Just a little something to brighten your day," she said, her smile warm and genuine. The unexpected kindness startled him, sending memories of laughter and warmth surging through his mind, memories he had long since buried under ambition and distress. He hesitated, pondering if this woman could understand the battles raging inside him. On impulse, he took the cookie, but that simple act felt like more than just sharing a treat. It felt like a moment of reckoning. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. That conversation unfolded much like the thread pulled on a long stuck zipper, revealing layers of shared struggles and unexpected truths. Sarah spoke of her father, an inventor betrayed by the greed of big corporations, a story that ignited a kindling of recognition within Jake. His heart clenched at her narrative. The betrayal echoed his internal chaos. How could he reconcile what he was part of with the horrific memories she shared? However, the grip of ambition clawed back at him. He was losing sleep, tied to the intricacies of business deals, while standing on the brink of unveiling a fraud that could plunge his career into despair. Thoughts jostled in his mind. Was wealth worth the moral decay? Could he bear the fallout if he exposed the truth, risking his position? The tension boiled within, a storm brewing as Sarah's genuine kindness clashed with the cold-hearted business atmosphere he inhabited. Each laugh exchanged, each cookie crumbled, was laced with heavy implications. Jake's thoughts spiraled, his inner turmoil threatening to suffocate him if he didn't find clarity soon. In a world that felt increasingly indifferent, could a single mom's gesture become the catalyst for his moral compass? And would he dare reclaim his humanity? The truth waited, lurking just beyond the horizon, demanding a decision that loomed larger than life itself, pulling him deeper into anguish with every heartbeat. Jake returned to the office that day with a lingering warmth that contrasted sharply against the cold, sterile environment of his corporate prison. The cookie Sarah had shared with him had ignited something inside, a small, flickering flame of hope intertwined with guilt. As he watched people shuffle through their routines, he found himself resenting the mask of professionalism he wore every day. Would anyone recognize the battle that raged beneath his polished exterior? Sitting at his desk, he attempted to focus on the strategy for the upcoming merger. Graphs and projections danced before his eyes, but the spreadsheets bore no weight compared to the conversation with Sarah. He pulled out a piece of paper, filling it with bullet points of thoughts that clamored for attention. Was he simply just another cog in the corporate machine, complicit in corrupt practices he despised? His pulse quickened with each stroke of his pen. The anxiety crept back in, tainting his every effort to maintain composure. As evening faded into night, he pored over documents revealing a pattern of shell companies and fraudulent billing. Jake's heart sank. Could he actively participate in this beast of greed, or was his time to become the person he once swore he wouldn't betray? The lines between right and wrong blurred further with every piece of evidence he uncovered, but Sarah's face loomed large in his mind. Her innocence, juxtaposed against his corporate reality, felt like the starkest of contrasts. The decision he was avoiding took shape like a shadow on his conscience. What was he truly chasing, wealth or honor? The memories of his grandfather, a man of integrity and conviction, flooded back. Jake remembered the lessons instilled in him, teachings that now felt like relics from a forgotten era. He began pacing, wrestling with his thoughts. Was his fear of losing status worth losing sight of who he was? Drawing a deep breath, he grabbed his phone and typed a message to his best friend, Mark. "Can we talk? It's important." Moments stretched like hours as he waited for a response. Each notification sound from his phone felt like a heartbeat, a constant reminder of time slipping away. Finally, Mark replied, "Sure, what's up?" Jake stood still. This was it, the moment he needed to break the cycle of silence. He initiated a video call, the familiar face flickering to life on the screen. "How's the merger planning going?" Mark asked casually, but the concern in his eyes ran deeper than the casual pleasantries. "It's not the merger that's bothering me," Jake admitted, voice trembling. Mark raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to disclose what weighed him down. "I can't shake the feeling that we're doing something wrong, like actively enabling a scam." Mark leaned closer, his arms crossed, the line between friend and confidant blurring. "If you think it's wrong, you have to say something, man. Your values should stand above everything." What if he did? The thought loomed like a heavy storm cloud. Will they listen? What if it backfires? Jake's resolve began to crystallize, raindrops of clarity pooling in the chaos of doubt. Sarah's kindness rang in his ears, urging him forward. "You're right," he finally breathed, a surprising surge of confidence flowing through him. "It's time I face it." Even as hope ignited within him, uncertainty loomed darkly at the edges. Jake knew he had to prepare himself for the fight ahead, to confront the corporation and everything it stood for. But first, he needed to understand the full extent of the corruption. How deep did the rot go, and would it change him forever? With a newfound determination, he grabbed his files again, rifling through them to unearth the details that would reinforce his drive for truth. Each section he read felt like a step closer to redemption. Yet still, the question remained. In fighting for right, what would he lose? As he pieced together the puzzle, an unsettling thought crept in. How were people going to react to the revelation of the truth? The time had come to face not just his company, but his own identity as well, to challenge the very nature of who he had become. Jake's mind was a whirlwind as he turned the pages of the dossier. Each document unveiled a new layer of deception, each signature a stark reminder of the betrayal he co-signed with his silence. The fluorescent lights hummed menacingly above, mirroring his escalating heartbeat. He could feel the weight of every decision pressing against him, a suffocating reminder that he stood at a crossroads between compliance and integrity. Lost in the crescendo of ethical dilemmas, he paused to reflect. Was it just the need for personal redemption that drove him, or a deeper longing for a purpose he had sacrificed on the altar of ambition? As he contemplated the implications of his inaction, a discomforting truth emerged. He had become more invested in the comfort of his role than the well-being of others, including Sarah. Each moment he spent researching the corruption felt like he was etching a path back to the person his grandfather admired. Yet he wrestled internally with the fear of losing everything he had built. With the documents sprawled before him, Jake noticed a peculiar contract. The vague terminologies and unclear billing procedures revealed a web that connected higher management to dubious offshore accounts. He felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead as he recognized that exposing these practices could have catastrophic implications, not just for himself, but for countless others at the firm. Yet his resolve hardened with each passing second. Driven by this urgency, he reached out to Sarah, contemplating how to articulate not just his findings, but his growing conviction. He needed a partner in this community of truth-telling, someone with the courage to see beyond their present entrapments. As he drafted a message, he hesitated, wondering if he was placing too much of a burden on her. Was he dragging her into a fight she hadn't chosen? An echo of Mark's words rang in his mind. Your values should stand above everything. Before he could second-guess himself, he sent the text. Typing out the risks that lay ahead stirred an unanticipated adrenaline rush. He embraced the uncertainty, believing wholeheartedly that the rough path ahead would forge the path to authenticity. Time passed heavily, each ticking second a reminder of his inaction. He craved validation, a sign that he was doing the right thing. In those moments of waiting, Jake experienced clarity. He recognized that to confront the corporation meant mending the fractured pieces of his identity. Each word would carry the weight of his past decisions and shape the trajectory of his future. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was Sarah, asking when they could meet. He suggested the nearby coffee shop, and with every exchange, anticipation surged. Would she understand the gravity of what he had uncovered? Would she risk her own tranquility for the chance to expose the truth? As he gathered his notes and put on a jacket, Jake felt an unfamiliar resolve washing over him. This was no longer just about him. It was about standing up for the people caught in the crossfire of corporate greed, the lost hopes of employees unaware of the darkness lurking within their everyday reality. As he approached the coffee shop, his heart raced. A firm handshake could signify alliance, a shared commitment to something greater. The innate thrill of possibility flickered in its own right. He could see a path paved ahead of him where he wasn't just another executive lost in the corporate grind, but a catalyst for change. The moment he stepped inside, the warmth wrapped around him, contrasted sharply against the heavy discussions he was about to initiate. And yet, as he scanned the room, a sense of unease washed over him. What if confronting this corruption spiraled further into chaos than he could handle? As Sarah walked through the door, Jake braced himself. He sensed that this meeting would determine not just their personal fates, but ripples through the entire company, igniting a confrontation that could reflect back on the person he once knew. "Hey, Jake," she greeted him with a smile, completely unaware of the storm brewing in his mind. The time had come for the pivotal conversation that could redefine everything. How far was he willing to go to uncover the truth, and what price was he prepared to pay? Jake met Sarah's smile with a nervous grin, masking the swirling turmoil within. They took a corner seat, a summit of sorts for two people grappling with a hidden menace. The aroma of coffee filled the air, yet the exchange felt anything but comforting. He studied her, his mind racing with questions. How would she react to his revelations? Would he find support or resistance in her? "Thanks for meeting me on such short notice," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. "Of course, you sounded urgent," Sarah replied, her brows knitting in curiosity. "What's going on?" This was it. Jake's heart thudded as he gauged her expression, seeking the right words to frame the gravity of his findings. "I've uncovered something at the firm, something serious." Her eyes widened slightly, an unspoken inquiry hanging between them. "What do you mean?" With a deep breath, he pushed the documents across the table. "These contracts reveal a pattern of corruption within upper management. We're talking about offshore accounts and money laundering. I believe they're exploiting the company and its employees." He watched as Sarah sifted through the papers, her eyes narrowing into focus. The weight of the truth pressed down on them, and he felt the boundaries of their professional camaraderie begin to blur into something more perilous. "Are you certain?" she asked, her tone wavering between skepticism and concern. "Absolutely. I've been researching for weeks now," he replied, his voice gaining conviction. This isn't just a gut feeling. Sarah looked up, her expression shifting to one of understanding. But if this is true, exposing them could ruin our careers and put us at risk. Jake nodded. The acknowledgement hung heavy in the air. This was the pivot point. He had to convince her that their shared integrity outweighed the potential fallout. But think about the employees. They trusted us. If we stay silent, we're complicit in this. I need your help to confront this. What do you propose we do? She asked, the fire in her voice igniting the conversation further. The tension morphed into a battle of wills, both aware of the abyss they were heading into. We gather everything we can find, then we take it to legal. But we need to be careful. If anyone gets wind of this before we're ready, it can backfire. Her hesitation was palpable. You realize we're risking our livelihoods, our lives, right? Sometimes doing what's right requires sacrifices, Jake insisted, fighting against a torrent of self-doubt that threatened to pull him under. As they exchanged ideas, weaving potential strategies, Jake felt a renewed sense of purpose coalescing around them. Each moment spent discussing how to proceed solidified his conviction. Sarah's insights provided clarity as she approached the situation with a level-headedness he admired. It was astonishing. This wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about reclaiming their identities too. Minutes turned into an hour, and as they wrapped up their discussion, a weight had lifted. They were two allies now, united in a cause larger than themselves. As they stood to leave, Sarah's hand briefly touched his, a small gesture that sparked warmth in the cold reality they were facing. I'm in, but we need a foolproof plan, she said, her resolve firming their alliance. Agreed, he replied, feeling calloused yet rejuvenated. They had transformed from colleagues into conspirators, fueled by a mission that threatened to unravel the very fabric of their lives. As they stepped into the bustling street, Jake felt the thrill of uncertainty coursing through him. This was only the beginning, and the fight was far from over. But in that moment, clarity washed over him. Taking back his integrity could well mean losing everything he had fought to build. Yet, standing shoulder to shoulder with Sarah, he found strength in his choices. Jake glanced at Sarah, and as they plotted their next moves strolling under the city lights, a question loomed in the recesses of his mind. How deep did the corruption run, and what sacrifices would they ultimately have to make to uncover it? Jake stared at the flickering city lights, the pulse of life around them contrasting sharply with the turmoil in his chest. His heart raced as thoughts raced. They were now in it together, allied against the very structure that had once supported him. The gravity of their endeavor felt overwhelming, yet exhilarating. What had felt insurmountable a day ago was now a shared mission, a flicker of hope igniting the seemingly barren landscape of corporate deceit. They walked side by side, Jake's mind a maelstrom of strategies and contingencies. Sarah's proximity, her unwavering resolve, kept igniting his determination. It struck him how pivotal this moment had become. He was stepping into uncharted territory, not just in terms of the fight against corporate wrongdoing, but also within himself. The courage to stand against something so powerful demanded a transformation he wasn't entirely sure he was ready for. Let's start gathering evidence tomorrow, Jake proposed, setting his mental gears into motion. I'll work on obtaining access to the records. If I can sneak into the archives, we can uncover documents that trace transactions. Sarah stopped, concern etched on her face. That could be risky, Jake. What if they catch you? We're already walking a thin line here. Jake contemplated her words, recognizing the truth in them. This fight wasn't solely about the evidence, it was about their safety too. I know, he replied, his voice steadier than he felt, but we need a breakthrough. Besides, risks are part of choosing integrity over complacency. As they resumed walking, he could feel a heavy burden of self-doubt creeping back in. What if he failed? The entire firm's hierarchical structure loomed like a colossal fortress, unyielding against intruders. As the crackling energy of the city enveloped them, he realized how essential it would be to embrace unconventional tactics, those that played to his strengths while keeping their identities hidden. Jake had always been resourceful. His knack for problem-solving had served him well, but now he sensed it needed to evolve. Emphasizing creativity over caution felt necessary. He hadn't faced adversity like this before. It was a crucible, refining him into something sharper, stronger. What's the plan if we do manage to collect something valuable? Sarah's inquiry pierced through his introspection, pulling him back to the reality of their situation. That's where the next phase comes in, he said, his voice laced with a renewed sense of purpose. After we gather evidence, we need to map a pathway to present it, possibly through anonymous channels first, to safeguard ourselves. If we expose this directly, it could lead to retaliation. Anonymity might buy us time, but it's also risky, she reminded him, her brows slightly furrowed. I get that, he admitted, the tension churning in his gut. But what she had misunderstood was how deeply this issue had entwined itself with his personal evolution. But think about it. Releasing evidence through those channels will allow us to maintain some level of control. Besides, I can't let fear dictate our actions anymore, not after everything that's at stake. Their conversation melded into the night, ideas branching like the twinkling lights above. Each possible plan twisted and turned in his mind, fusing with visions of integrity, justice, and the promise of accountability. With each exchanged idea, Jake caught glimpses of the person he was transforming into, someone unafraid of standing his ground. As they reached the corner where they would part ways, Sarah turned to him, a contemplative look on her face. You realize that doing this could change everything, right? A chill coursed through him at the weight of her words. I do, he acknowledged, allowing her gaze to pierce him. But what's life without a little risk? We can't be bystanders anymore. With a nod, her expression shifted from concern to respect, strengthening their bond further. As they separated, Jake felt the quiet tumult of his resolve taking root. He would forge ahead, and while the shadows of uncertainty loomed large, he was ready to face them. But deeper questions lingered. How far would they go to uphold their integrity? And what dangers lay ahead that might test both their trust and their commitment? Just as he turned to walk home, a fleeting feeling of dread seeped in. It seemed the real fight was just beginning, but Jake no longer felt paralyzed. The moment had come to face the darkness head-on, and he was prepared to navigate whatever was next. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching, waiting for the moment to strike. The following day dawned gray and overcast, a reflection of the brewing storm inside Jake's mind. After a restless night spent wrestling with thoughts of their mission, he awoke determined yet on edge. What if the evidence they gathered was insufficient? What if their actions triggered a chain reaction that spiraled beyond their control? He reminded himself of the stakes. Every moment spent in hesitation would further entrench the corporation's grip on deceit and oppression. Today wasn't just about searching for documents. It was about igniting a spark that could unravel the web of corruption choking the company he once revered. Navigating his way to the office, Jake rehearsed his moves like an actor preparing for a pivotal role. His short walk felt symbolic, a crossing from the old Jake, the compliant worker, to the new Jake, the determined whistleblower. He couldn't afford to be caught off guard. Every detail mattered. Once inside the office, he made small talk with familiar faces, deliberately masking the whirlwind of adrenaline coursing through him. Each casual smile felt like a dagger aimed at his burgeoning resolve. He needed to remain inconspicuous while strategizing. He could feel the weight of Sarah's trust hanging over him, which only fueled his drive. He hunkered down at his desk, resisted the urge to dive into routine work, and instead started mapping out a plan of action. Sneaking into the archives wouldn't just require skill, it would involve cunning tactics. Familiarizing himself with the office layout became priority number one. He made mental notes of the security protocols he had often ignored before, the timing of guards' breaks, the blind spots of security cameras, and the hours of lesser traffic in the office. Every observation brought a thrill, a sense of empowerment. The groundwork was being laid not just for their mission, but for Jake himself. But as he sketched diagrams on a notepad, Unease curled in his stomach. Who was he without the confines of his corporate identity? Was he just a coward daring to step into the light, or a hero determined to confront his fears? The line between right and wrong felt blurred, the fear of discovery crystal clear. Jake's concentration shattered when he heard hushed voices behind him. He couldn't help but overhear bits of conversation. His colleagues were buzzing with rumors about a string of recent layoffs and company restructuring. "It's getting harder to keep compliance reports under wraps," one voice said. Jake leaned back, suddenly gripped by the realization that he wasn't alone in his unease. Perhaps this was more widespread than he thought. The system designed to protect the corrupt was beginning to show cracks. It incited a flicker of hope. Perhaps others were slowly awakening to the deception. Once in the break room, he met Sarah's gaze. Her expression was a mirror of his uncertainty mixed with fierce resolve. "Ready?" she asked quietly, the urgency palpable between them. Jake nodded, feeling a jolt of adrenaline surge through him. "Let's do this. We have to find something today." They made their way to the secluded part of the office where the archives resided. Each step felt heavy with consequence, but Jake embraced it. Confidence surged within him, fueled by the knowledge that channeling his fear into action was pushing him closer to becoming a man of integrity. When they reached the archive door, Jake's pulse quickened. He glanced at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. With a deep breath, he began the search, flipping through the filing cabinets filled with years of hidden truths. Papers rustled under his touch like ghosts of the past, and suddenly he understood the weight of the mission they had undertaken. It wasn't merely about uncovering wrongdoing, it was about reclaiming his own agency. The further they delved into the records, the clearer it became that this mission would force him to confront not only the corporation's flaws, but his own deep-seated fears. He was no longer just a pawn in a corporate chess game. He was ready to emerge as a player, a force for accountability. But just as they unearthed a folder marked confidential, a shadow loomed behind them. Jake's heart dropped as he turned. The face that greeted him was one he recognized all too well, the firm's COO, stepping out of the shadows with a predatory smile. "Looks like you've found something interesting," the COO said, a chill settling in the air. In that moment, Jake realized every decision had consequences, and the real game was just beginning. His mind raced. Would he still have the courage to stand tall, or would this confrontation shatter their plans before they even began? Jake's instincts screamed at him to bolt, but the reality of the situation anchored him in place. He exchanged a glance with Sarah, whose wide, startled eyes mirrored his own mixture of fear and resolve. The CO's presence, imposing and suffocating, made the air thick with tension. "What are you two doing back here?" the COO asked, stepping closer, his voice smooth yet laced with suspicion. Jake's mind raced through possible lies, each one feeling like quicksand pulling him deeper into trouble. Uncertain whether to lie or tell the truth, Jake felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him. He needed a distraction, a way to shift the focus and delay the confrontation. "We were looking for some old project files, but it seems we got lost," he said, forcing a casual tone. It sounded weak, even to his own ears. The CO's smile widened, but it lacked warmth. "Lost? In the archives? That's unusual for someone in your position, Jake." Jake clenched his fists, biting back a retort. This was the same man who had smiled while slashing jobs and ruining lives. "It's been busy lately," he replied, feeling the tension radiate off him like heat from an open flame. "Indeed it has," replied the COO, his demeanor shifting, an undercurrent of menace pulsing through his words. "I'd hate to see two promising employees compromised by a little curiosity." With that, he stepped back slightly, allowing a loathsome smile to take over. Jake's heart raced even faster. "We'll just head back to our desks," he stammered, hoping to defuse the situation. "Oh, I wouldn't be in such a rush," the COO countered, raising an eyebrow. You must know that I have eyes everywhere. It would be prudent to remember that our little conversations can have lasting impacts. Cold sweat trickled down Jake's spine. The COO was veiled in metaphors, but they cut deeper than knives. It was clear he knew more than Jake had anticipated. Anxiety twisted into determination. They had found something vital, and now they needed to leave without triggering alarm. Jake recovered just enough composure to say, "We'll be careful. Thanks for your concern." Looking to Sarah, he signaled with a subtle nod. They needed a plan, something that ensured their survival in this dangerous game without backup from anyone else. As they pivoted to leave, the COO's voice called after them, a warning laced with mockery. You know, new insights can be enlightening, but not if they lead you into darkness. Walking back to their desks, Jake's mind whirred, evaluating the implications of the encounter. How viable was their mission if eyes were already on them? The weight of the COO's words was heavy with foreshadowing. He needed strategies that would allow them to continue digging while remaining undetected. Sitting at his desk, he rifled through papers mechanically, lost in thought. This was no longer about uncovering the corporation's secrets. It was also about mastering his own fears and weaknesses. He was no longer only a whistleblower. He was evolving into a strategist. "Jake," Sarah whispered, leaning toward him. "What now? We can't go back to being passive. We have to stay ahead of him." A flicker of resolve ignited within Jake. "We need to leverage what we've already seen. If we can create diversions, perhaps we can investigate further without raising too many suspicions." Sarah nodded, her eyes reflecting her urgency. "We can also start gathering allies, people who might feel the same. We need to create a network." For the first time, Jake felt the burden of his responsibilities morph into empowerment. They weren't just two frightened employees anymore. They were architects of a rebellion, reclaiming their voices one step at a time. Just then, a thought struck wildly. The reports they're trying to cover up, what if we could access them discreetly? There's bound to be evidence of the unrest, maybe even lapses in protocol they haven't swept under the rug. Sarah's brows knitted together, then relaxed with a hint of a smile. That could work. If we can compile enough evidence, it could shake things up. Steeled by a newfound purpose, Jake felt something shift within him, urging him to embrace this challenge fully. He realized that the only way to combat fear was to charge forward, even if uncertainty loomed ahead. But as they began sketching out their next moves, a notification pinged on Jake's phone, a company-wide memo about an emergency meeting scheduled for later that day. Warnings weaved through his thoughts like static. The COO wasn't done with them yet, and the real fight was just about to begin. The hours trickled by painfully, the anticipation mounting like the pressure in a shaken soda can. As the time for the emergency meeting approached, dread clawed at Jake's insides. He stared at the blinking cursor on his computer screen, the blank page before him a stark reminder that his next move needed strategy, precision, and courage. "Do you think he knows?" Sarah's voice cut through the growing tension, pulling him from spiraling thoughts. Jake shrugged, his expression betraying a simmering determination. "If he does, we'll need to pivot. We can't afford to show weakness." They exchanged quick glances, silently pressing each other to stand tall, to fortify their resolve. He wasn't just fighting for his job or his safety anymore. He was standing up for what they believed was right. The stakes had morphed from personal survival into a high-stakes battle against manipulation and dishonesty. As faces began to filter into the meeting room, the air felt electric. The whispers of uncertainty clouded his mind. Each person who filed in added layers to his anxiety. Every single colleague was an unknown variable in a tense equation that could shift drastically within moments. When the COO finally entered the room, he held an unsettling confidence, a facade of control that set Jake's teeth on edge. The COO's eyes scanned the room with a predatory gaze, fixing on Jake and Sarah briefly before dismissing them. Jake could feel that gaze piercing through the mask of indifference he tried to maintain. "Thank you all for joining," the COO began, projecting authority, his tone deceptively smooth. "As you may be aware, recent developments in our operations have raised some concerns." Jake tuned out the rest of the words, his mind racing. Developments, he thought, which they're trying desperately to cover up. He scanned the other faces, looking for signs of fear or agreement, but they all appeared reticent, clawed by the CEO's intimidation. With the COO's glib comments serving as mere background noise, Jake formulated his own plan. He realized this wasn't just about information retrieval. They needed to sow discord indirectly to unearth a cooperative spirit among their colleagues while ensuring their scheme remained hidden. After the meeting's formalities came the moment of doom. Though the COO wouldn't say it directly, everyone understood the ominous undertones of job stability and loyalty. It boiled down into a pitiful warning. We all need to remember our loyalties lie here with the company. Jake knew this was a crucial moment. The words were meant to infect fear, to silence voices that might dare to question management's intentions. As the meeting concluded, he leaned towards Sarah, getting ready to set their plan into motion. "We have to plant seeds of doubt in private conversations. It has to feel organic, not forced. Tomorrow, we begin." She nodded, her determination matching his. "And while we do that, we make sure we watch our backs." Jake had increasingly realized the transformation within himself. Each confrontation had sculpted him into someone more wary, someone more prepared to confront the uncomfortable realities lurking in the shadows of the corporate world. But as they headed back toward their desks, an urgent text message lit up Jake's phone. His breath caught in his throat as he read it. Urgent meeting in the lounge. The tension constricted around him as he exchanged glances with Sarah, each of them recognizing the palpable threat wrapped in that simple phrase. The moments they had planned to gain traction in their endeavor were quickly slipping away, replaced by the COO's looming shadow. Jake felt the hairs on the back of his neck prickle. This was either a trap or an opportunity, and the urgency to navigate this evolving scenario surged within him. Their fight against oppression was accelerating, and Jake was no longer convinced they had the luxury to wait. It was time to act boldly. "Whatever it is, we can't ignore it. We go now," he said, a fierce fire igniting in his chest as they made their way toward the lounge. The real challenge was taking shape, and Jake knew that some truths wouldn't merely unlock doors. They could smash through walls. But the deeper they plunged into this labyrinth, the more perilous the outcome. Jake's mind raced with possibilities, and as uncertainty hovered on the horizon, he couldn't shake the thought, what unexpected truths lay behind this meeting, waiting to either condemn or empower them? Jake walked briskly alongside Sarah toward the lounge, their footsteps echoing on the polished floor like the rapid heartbeat of an impending conflict. He could feel his pulse quickening, fueled by the mix of dread and a burgeoning sense of purpose. This meeting could very well pivot the precarious situation they found themselves in. He recognized the potential for both calamity and opportunity. As they reached the lounge, a wave of anxiety washed over him at the sight of the assembled group. The COO stood at the forefront, flanked by upper management. Their expressions painted a vivid portrait of authority draped in tension. Each figure felt like an unmovable fortress, eyes darting with suspicion and curiosity as Jake and Sarah entered. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," the COO began, his voice smooth yet chilling. "I trust you have all been following company developments closely." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink into the crowd. "We're here to clarify our direction moving forward." Jake's instincts screamed at him to listen, yet he couldn't suppress the feeling that this was a rehearsal of sorts, designed to deflect attention from serious misgivings. He scanned the room, his analytical mind dissecting micro-expressions, Nervous twitches, brief exchanges of glances, and barely their sighs from his colleagues who, like him, bore the burdens of uncertainty. For the first time, Jake understood the collective weight of their fears. They were all trapped in this web of ambiguity. "Let's be clear," the COO continued, pacing like a predator sizing up a potential prey. "We need everyone on board. Transparency is key, but it is vital that we remain united. Any dissent will be dealt with swiftly." In that moment, Jake's resolve solidified. No longer could he allow fear to dictate his actions. The stakes hadn't just risen, they were at a breaking point. The danger of remaining silent was eclipsed only by the risk of displacement. Jake realized in that instant that silence led to complicity. A vision of his crumbling ideals and stifling compliance surged up within him, igniting a fierce decision. He raised his hand, his heart pounding, as the eyes of the room turned toward him. The COO's eyebrows shot up, a mixture of surprise and annoyance crossing his face. "Yes," came the clipped response. "I have a point of clarification," Jake stated, his voice unwavering despite the chaos in his mind. "You mentioned transparency, yet many of us are under the impression that hidden agendas are at play. Can you address the recent rumors regarding impending layoffs or reorganization?" The thunderous silence that felt oppressive, but empowerment coursed through him. This was his moment of confrontation, an invitation to unveil the hidden truths that loomed over the organization. The COO's icy demeanor faltered momentarily, the tension thickening like fog. "Let's not jump to conclusions," he replied, an edge entering his tone. "We're here to support each other." "No, we're here to protect our interests," Jake interrupted, feeling the adrenaline sharpen his focus. "If trust is to be rebuilt, it has to start with honesty. It's clear that many of us are worried, and it seems an open dialogue is overdue." Unsure if his audacity would backfire, Jake felt a wave of weight lift from his shoulders, liberating him momentarily. In confronting fear, he found his voice, and hearing it appear fearless felt empowering, transformative even. While he anticipated backlash, he was no longer alone in this. He could see it in the hesitant nods from across the room. The COO's irritation didn't go unnoticed, but more importantly, the atmosphere shifted, like a chalkboard being wiped clean. Sarah squeezed his arm, as if to affirm their alignment, the resolute silence inviting courage to flood in, much like light piercing dark clouds. "Very well," the COO said, regaining a semblance of control. "Let's open the floor for discussion." As discussions surged around him, Jake deployed every ounce of focus to listen and engage. Each voice, once shadowed by resignation, began to articulate concerns and feelings of discontent. For Jake, this wasn't merely a meeting, it was a revolution within the walls that bound them. In that shared space, Jake sensed an alliance forming, one that could potentially alter the fabric of their work environment. But as tensions flared and conversations spiraled, Jake understood that the real challenge lay ahead. His voice had become a catalyst, inciting vulnerability among his peers, now empowered to question the status quo. Would they rally behind their newfound resolve or retreat into silence? Amidst the rising chorus, one thought echoed relentlessly in Jake's mind. How far would he have to push for true change? It was a gamble, but for the first time, he felt that they might have the chance to unearth a more collaborative environment or explode the festering undercurrents threatening to split them apart. What he didn't know was that someone in the room was hiding a deeper agenda, one that could either shatter their efforts or fortify them beyond what he could imagine. The meeting descended into chaos as discussions escalated, voices overlapping with palpable urgency. Yet amidst the turbulence, Jake felt an undeniable shift. What began as a quiet gathering of fearful employees was morphing into a collective vow against complacency. Each outburst from his colleagues reflected the constraints they had silently endured under the looming specter of the COO's authority. "Jake's right," a woman from HR finally exclaimed, her voice striking an empowering chord. "We need transparency. We've been left in the dark for too long while the higher-ups make decisions without consulting us." Jake glanced at Sarah, her expression a blend of astonishment and pride. It was as if they were standing at the cusp of a revolution, sharing not just fears, but a shared purpose, each individual willing to lay bare their collective grievances. He had ignited something, not just for himself, but for everyone around him. As more colleagues spoke out, Jake felt gratitude swell. They understood the risks, yet chose to confront them. The COO watched intently, his expression hardening with every word of dissent. Jake sensed a storm brewing, knowing they were stepping into uncharted territory. Time was slipping through their fingers, and they found themselves teetering on the brink of confrontation that could lead to liberating clarity or disastrous consequences. "What are you trying to accomplish by stirring this up?" the COO snapped, taking a step closer to Jake, his voice rising with each word. "You would rather jeopardize everything you've worked for than stay loyal to the company?" In that moment, Jake's resolve crystallized. He straightened, his heartbeat steadying as adrenaline coursed through him. "I'm loyal to integrity," he replied defiantly, meeting the COO's gaze head-on. "This company could be a force for good if we choose to act with transparency and respect." The COO's face contorted in disbelief, yet Jake was no longer intimidated. The fear that had held him captive for too long shattered like glass underfoot. A flicker of recognition sparked amidst the chaos, and he realized their fight was no longer solely about exposing the truth. It was about reclaiming their identities. As voices clamored for change, Jake sensed a renewed camaraderie evolving. Conversations linked experiences and fostered hope. They collectively sought a truth buried within layers of deceit. Then, amidst the uproar, another hand shot up in the crowd, a colleague from finance, known for her discretion. "I overheard talk about changes being made to the expense reports," she confessed, pulling the entire room's attention. "And I have proof that suggests funds were misallocated." The revelation hit like a thunderclap, energizing the uprising further. Murmurs turned into determined chants for accountability. They were all now entwined in a struggle against the corrosive hold of greed infiltrating their workplace. Jake felt a surge of validation. These were his peers, now standing together as a collective force, unshackled from fear. But the COO's growing frustration lingered as he calculated his next move. "We will not let this company fall to emotional decisions," he warned, a tight smile masking his agitation. "Those who threaten our stability will face consequences." Jake's instinct flared. They needed a counterplan to ensure their momentum wasn't abruptly halted. "Then let the consequences be borne by those of us standing for what is right," he shot back, lifting the energy in the room. "We'll not be silenced any longer." The COO's dismissive demeanor gave way to concern as the tide was visibly turning. Whispers among employees began shifting toward plotting their next moves, seeking solidarity against a defensive management team. Suddenly, Jake realized that this was their moment, and opportunities like this don't come often. "Let's form an informal committee to investigate what's happening behind closed doors," he suggested, his voice resonating with authority. "If they think they can intimidate us, they're mistaken. We can document our findings and approach HR with legitimate concerns." His proposition landed like a crash of cymbals. Skepticism mingled with excitement, and the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. People turned to each other, nodding in agreement, forming connections that felt deeper than simple professional courtesy. Just as he felt hope crystallizing, the COO cut in sharply. "I won't allow that," he stated, crossing his arms. "This could easily be dismissed as an uprising from disgruntled employees. I can assure you, your jobs are on the line if you proceed." In that instant, Jake felt a flicker of uneasiness hit the crowd. Silence thickened the air, and he understood this was the critical juncture. Would they fold under threat, or would they stand resolute against the tide of intimidation that had dominated for so long? And Jake realized that this moment could either fortify their bonds or scatter their resolve. "Listen," he said, taking a step forward. "We have an opportunity to change our environment and reclaim our lives and careers. But fear only brings us back to silence. Are we willing to risk everything for our integrity today?" His voice cut through the tension, igniting courage like wildfire. One by one, colleagues began to nod, the fear melting into conviction. They were coalescing into a formidable force, fueled by the light of reclaiming their dignity. As the COO's face began to pale, Jake held the gaze of his peers. "We're fighting for what's right, and together we won't let intimidation extinguish our flame. This is the birth of something powerful." With a collective voice breaking through the silence, Jake felt recognition at the core of his being. He had not only set stage for change, but he had emerged as a beacon of hope, a testament to transformation born from newfound integrity. And as they rose united, a single thought lingered. They were prepared to protect their quest for integrity, even if it meant confronting the highest stakes of their careers and lives. Jake stood tall amidst the storm brewing above, ready to face the consequences, now side by side with his allies. In just a fleeting moment, he realized they were no longer passive players. They were agents of change. Their fight was just beginning, but Jake embraced it wholeheartedly, knowing now beyond doubt that he had taken the first step toward reclaiming everything he had almost lost. But beyond the veil of courage, the darker shadows lurked, with the COO scheming behind closed doors, waiting for their pivotal standoff. As each colleague proclaimed their allegiance, Jake felt the weight of identity shift, igniting their collective embers in a shared resolve. The path ahead remained steep, yet in that instant, one thing became clear. There was no retreating. Only forward momentum toward revolution and truth. Stand firm, Jake thought. Embrace this fight. Transformation comes to those who dare chase it. The journey to uncover the truth was just beginning, but they were ready. He was ready.